Welcome to the Apache Cassandra Corner, a community-driven podcast for all things Apache Cassandra. I am your host, Aaron Pletz. All right, everyone. Welcome back. Today, I'm joined by Jon Haddad, who's a longtime member of the Apache Cassandra community. Jon, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Hey, Aaron. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. So this was kind of your idea. You know, we were talking at the Cassandra Summit back in December, and you're like, "Hey, I'd love to do the podcast," and that's really great. To be honest, like this time of year, like January-ish, last year I took a little bit of a break, call it like a natural break between seasons. So technically, this would be like episode 1 of season 3, I think.
Oh, I love it, man.
So
I
yeah,
love
you're
it.
leading us off here, Jon.
Oh God, that's amazing. Well, I hope I set the season up on the right foot.
Oh yeah. I have no doubts.
All right.
All right. So
pressure's on.
so Jon, of course, you've been in the community a while. Why don't you start by telling us a little about yourself, and then how you got involved with Cassandra?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because as we were talking about doing this, I had to go back on LinkedIn and look. I actually had to look at my resume to figure out when I started using Cassandra. And it was like 2013.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. It's one of those things. I was working at this startup in the LA area, and we were using a lot of MongoDB there, and like some Neo4j, and it was a bunch of tech that didn't really make sense for what we were doing. And
right.
I had read the the original Cassandra book, which was it talked about thrift and kind of the underlying storage engine. So I had the storage engine in my head. I had the I had how the cluster kind of behaves in my head, and I knew that, and then I was like, okay, let's leverage Cassandra for this new project. It was actually, it wasn't really a new project. It was a project that was not running well with all the Mongo stuff, like all that other. And I kind of just replaced everything with Cassandra. And I was in this position where it was like Cassandra 1.1 was out. And CQL was like CQL 3. You could
was like brand new.
Yeah, it was brand new. Yeah. Nobody was using it. This was everybody was like, "What is this craziness?" And I looked at it and I was like, "This is awesome! Like this makes total sense." Like,
yep,
I love schema. To me, like the idea of having no schema for a database is like it doesn't make sense to me. Like I want to be able to look and just look at it and tell me what it is. So
I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And a lot of people just like want to put it in their app, but for me, I'm a database guy more than I am the application guy. So I got that into production, and then I started writing about it. And then all of a sudden I'm doing like webinars about our move from Mongo to Cassandra, and I'm writing about time series on Cassandra and how CQL maps to the underlying storage engine. And that stuff, it turned out was pretty popular. And DataStax was a really young company at the time.
Yep.
So I ended up getting involved with like Patrick McFadden and Christian Hasker, and like all of a sudden now, I'm in the community and I'm on IRC, and going back and forth with the committers who, at the time I was like, oh my God, I'm like talking to these people are just so smart.
And I know, right? Yeah, I get the same. Yep.
Yeah, like there's just so many smart people that work on this project.
That's right.
And then when I decided to leave that startup, I ended up coming to DataStax and working with Patrick for like 3 or 4 years. And it was awesome. Like it was kind of this like perfect moment in time as Cassandra was getting bigger.
Yep.
All of a sudden we're putting on, I don't know if you remember Cassandra Day, but we were getting like 500 to 800 people would show up for these like free Cassandra conferences. Oh yeah, there you have your shirt. I love it,
Yeah, I've got
dude.
this shirt from it. This is like from 2015 in
Yeah,
Chicago. Yeah, that's the one I
yeah,
was at.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was awesome. I
it really
loved
was.
attending it.
Yeah,
Yeah, getting for me, like I didn't realize how much I loved getting up and talking about technology and like helping people understand it.
yeah,
Like it was
yeah.
it was a huge deal for me. I went from being like a guy that worked on small teams and startups to being like a person that's helped thousands of people learn how to use this, this database.
Oh, right,
Um,
right.
and yeah, it was just this incredible kind of journey for me. And then that led me eventually to the last pickle with Aaron Morton and Nate McCall,
Yep, yep.
who are kind of hilarious, are both at DataStax
At
now.
data stacks now.
And yeah, I ended up doing all the a lot of consulting over there, and I got really, really, really into the performance stuff,
Sure,
um,
sure.
and building out tools for performance evaluation, things like that. So uh, eventually then all of a sudden I'm at Apple and I'm working on the 4.0 upgrade and building
That's
out all
right.
the
That's
tooling.
right.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's like all of a sudden one thing just kind of leads to another. And then I'm like, wait, I'm like working on this like crazy, like Kubernetes based like system that's evaluating whether or not we have defects in Cassandra. And I built all this automation around it. And like there's all this like distributed tracing and like all this like really cool stuff that allowed you to
Yeah, yeah.
allowed us to figure out like if Cassandra was broken,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
we found a lot of bugs through that. And then then all of a sudden I'm at Netflix, and it's like I'm like fixing production issues at Netflix and doing all this like performance tuning on like the most critical clusters that we had in the company, and like it's just kind of like when you take a step back, it's been an incredible experience. Like working with this database and becoming like so familiar with it has really given me a
Oh, for
huge career,
sure.
just
Yeah.
an amazing career. And I look back at it. I mean, I'm not like 70, I'm in the middle of it still. Uh, but I look at it and it's just like it's allowed me to do something that I never would have thought was possible. Um, so that's a super long-winded answer.
No,
But
that's great. That's
yeah,
great. And you mentioned a lot of the places that you work too, and I mean, in all of those places were like, like a lot of the big players in the Cassandra world. Especially talking about like Apple and Netflix with just like the sheer scale of
yeah,
clusters that they have and that you're working on, and I can just imagine that working at that extreme scale. I mean, I worked at Target, which I mean, we had a 200 node cluster, and several others that were pretty big, but we were nothing like what Apple and Netflix are at. So I just think that's
yeah.
super cool. Then I can imagine like the lessons that you learn, working at that gigantic scale must just be awesome.
Yeah, it's really remarkable because, like, I think when we did a lot of, like I said, I did a lot of performance tuning
Hmm.
with the last pickle, but we didn't really build the automation that people were using to manage environments that large. So going from that, where I was primarily focused on kind of diagnosing what was going on in the cluster, fixing an issue, like looking at individual nodes, to
Hmm.
looking at an environment where there's like 200,000 nodes in production, like at Apple, or at Netflix. I think it's like 25 or 30,000 nodes, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But tons of clusters and kind of the automation to like deal with problems as they pop up. It's really remarkable because it's like things that are really that seem really small at small scale. There are small things like a node replacement, right?
Oh,
Like you
sure.
might have
Yeah.
someone do a node replacement by hand, but you literally cannot do that at Apple scale. It's like it's going to burn people out. So you have to have these incredibly sophisticated systems in place, and the team. I mean, the teams at Apple and Netflix are amazing. Like they're just world class. Like they're literally dealing with the most crazy scale. So every little problem can become a huge problem when it becomes a problem, 10,000 times.
Oh, for
Uh,
sure. Yeah, yeah.
200,000 times. So yeah, it was really, really great to be able to work on that stuff. Um, yeah, again, I'm incredibly fortunate to have been there and been able to learn so much along the way from everybody. Um, and it kind of put me in this really great position when I left Netflix about a year ago,
Hmm.
um, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with at the next stage of my career. And I was like, all right, like, I took a little bit of time off and I was kind of thinking
Yeah,
about it. And I
yeah,
was like, what did I remember? Like, what's the best things that I have done in my career? And I wrote them all down. And I was like, honestly, I think I need to start my own company and just do this because I love helping people. I love fixing problems. I actually really like putting out dumpster fires. uh whenever there's like if the people come to me and they're like, production, it's crazy, like, I'm like, oh, slick my lips. I'm like, this is going to be fun. And then I can, then I can help people get over it. And it's like, you
yeah,
look at the
yeah.
difference before and after. It's just so much fun to be like, look at the change here that I've been
Hmm. Hmm.
able to accomplish. So that's kind of what brought me to my current situation, where I'm
Yeah.
just, rocking
Well,
out on my own.
yeah, that's awesome, man. So,
Yeah.
along your roles along the ways, and I mean, I'm going to hone in specifically on the last pickle.
Hmm.
You wrote a lot of great articles out there that have been super helpful. And I'm gonna specifically point out the Cassandra performance tuning compression with mixed workloads one.
Hmm.
Um, I actually use that quite a bit at Target. The tips you have in there around really, kind of like tuning, Cassandra itself to the workloads that are coming in. It was super helpful.
Thank
The
you. Yeah.
specifically like the chunk size parameter that's on the table, so you can like kind of shorten up how much you're reading off a disk at the time and not reading too much or too little. And yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the number one problem. The number one issue that I see with clusters, and I'm probably like shooting myself in the foot by always talking about it because it's probably like costing me business, but I just can't help it. It literally is the number one issue that I see. People will be, people will have like a write heavy workload, and
yep,
they'll be
yep.
doing some reads, right? But the cost of doing the reads is so high, especially if they're using lightweight transactions or counters, or if they just have small
Oh,
reads in
right.
general,
Yeah, yeah.
because the read amplification, both from compression and read ahead, is so massive that you could be reading like 2K worth of data, but doing 128 or 256, or reading like a meg of data if you're hitting four SS tables and they're not in your page cache, or yeah, depending on a number of scenarios, you could read a ton of data
Oh,
just
yeah.
to return a tiny bit of information. Um, and so, it's really, really interesting because it kind of led me down, now where I'm like, I'm kind of now obsessed with this suite of tools that I've been using, these observability tools, which have been phenomenal. BCC tools. I've been doing a lot of work with profilers. I talk about those a lot.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
actually just did a couple of videos in my YouTube channel, where I kind of show people how they can be done. And I
Oh,
actually spoke about
nice.
this at the Cassandra conference,
Yeah,
back
yeah.
in December.
That's
So
right.
yeah, and it's really interesting when you start doing the math and you realize that you're doing like 30 times the IO on disk that you're pushing through the network, and it's just
Yeah.
like, wow, like if I completely saturate my drive, and that's my main limiting factor here. And then you're also like decompressing more data, which means that you're putting more pressure on the CPU, and things just kind of don't work that well. And it's actually the reason why that setting was changed in 4.0.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that default is now 16, because you
Right.
get roughly the same compression rate, but for small reads, you can literally do 4 times as many reads,
Yep.
which is like, it's kind of wild.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, if I'm remembering right though, that change has to be made like in conjunction with with like a change to the page cache, or or like the disk.
That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
the disk read
That's
ahead, right?
read ahead. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the way read ahead works is when you have a request that goes to your disk, the first thing that happens is that gets sent from the application, and then the kernel is like, hey, how about I go ahead and just read a bunch of data first, pull it into the page cache, and then you
Hmm.
get the response out of page cache.
Right.
So there are some really nice utilities where you can take a look at like what's happening at the file system level. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
use a tool called XFS Slower, if you're using the XFS file system,
Okay.
and this
Nice.
exists for all the Linux file systems,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can look at every single request that comes in, or you can look at requests that are slower than a specific time, but you can pass 0 and see every single request. And then you can use a tool called biolatency. Biolatency will show you the latency distribution of all of your IO requests. And there's also one called byte size where you can see the distribution of the size. So you'll get histograms for both. So with all those tools put together, you can actually get a really good idea of what's happening at your file system level and then what's happening at the block level. And then you combine
Wow.
that with a tool called cache stat, and then you can get an idea of your overall cache effectiveness. So like I actually had worked on a performance problem at Netflix where like a team thought that we had there was a database migration and we had moved from like version 2 to version 3, but also from
Sure.
instance storage to EBS. And so like a lot of
Yeah.
things changed. And so EBS had it's still in some areas has a bad reputation, but the thing is it's improved a ton. Like EBS is, if you use it right, it's pretty phenomenal right now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's not cheap, especially if you use it wrong, and you have, if you leave
Right.
read ahead on, it's not cheap at all.
Yep.
But if you dial it in right, it's really really good.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Anyway, the team was blaming EBS, and this was like a 600 node cluster we had just migrated, and it took 2 years. And so it
You
had
do the
started way before
migration?
I got there. Yeah, I showed up at the
Oh my
tail end of this
God.
migration, and it was like, John, like, what do you think about this? And I was like, well, and I pulled out all the tools I just mentioned, and I was like, look,
Yeah.
like here's the analysis. I go, look at biolatency. We can see that there isn't a single IO request that is over 2 milliseconds. When we look at the file system distribution, we see that we're not getting anything slow. We
Yep.
see
Yep.
we see a bimodal distribution where some stuff comes out of page cache and some stuff goes to disk. And then with cache stat, we know that we were getting 99% cache hit rate.
Hmm.
So it doesn't explain, and we were seeing 4 SS tables per read at the 99th percentile. So it didn't explain why our at the tail end of our latency was up around 100 milliseconds. And it was, I think
Yikes.
the P90 like 8 was like 6, and the P99 was like 100.
Yeah,
And
that's a big
everybody was like,
jump.
oh, yeah, people are like, oh, it's EBS. But when you do
Yeah.
the evaluation, you can get really good numbers out of the kernel nowadays. It tells you exactly what you need to know.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
I was like, I'm 100% sure it's not this. And then when we looked at the schema, it had been accidentally configured with read repair chance set to 0.01, but we were running multiple data centers. So we were actually getting penalized because it was going out and doing cross DC
Doing like
read
cross
repair.
DC read repair.
Exactly. And then that
Oh
was getting,
God.
yeah. So that was the root, that ended up being the root cause of the problem. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting for me because the cost of switching all of your disks out and moving everything to new instances would
Hmm.
have been like a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, Netflix is great because the automation is there, but it still had to happen. People would have been nervous. Then we would have had to like make sure that there was no data loss along the way, and like it would have been a whole thing.
Yep.
But
Yep.
because of these tools, I was able to evaluate with almost no work that it wasn't EBS. EBS was completely fine. We never saw a single request go to disk that was like over 3 milliseconds. And just changing that one setting brought, like, as soon as we changed the setting, everything was fine. And everybody was like, oh, it was easy. It's like, yeah, it was just literally just one setting.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Long story, kind of a long story, but
Yeah. No, that's
it's why
cool.
I
That's
always,
cool.
yeah, it's why I always talk about these tools, and I
Right.
try to get
Right.
everybody to use this stuff because it's so good. It's so
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
And the insight that you can get out of it is absolutely amazing.
That's awesome, John. So hey, we've talked about your new consulting gig a little bit, but One thing that I'd heard was that you're now offering like training courses as well.
Yes.
Yeah, can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that?
I would love to. So I am so excited about this. Um, One of the things that I realized with consulting is that I was only able to help a small group of people at a time.
Right.
So I come
Right.
in, maybe I have a multi-month engagement with somebody, and like, it's great. I'm able to help people and solve their problems, but I want to do more than that. I want to have a bigger impact than that. And what I realized is if I could take the experience that I have and share it with, a group of people, I could help a lot of people go from good developers or good operators to ones that actually have the benefit of the experience of working at these large organizations. See, one of
Right.
the big
Right.
problems that happens is that when you don't get to see how these teams work, you don't really know how things should work. So, I've worked with a team that managed 1,000 Cassandra nodes by changing configuration by hand, or like going through these like crazy change
Oh
processes.
man.
Yeah, everything was done by hand. Like literally, if they wanted to add a new Cassandra node, they had someone copying a tarball on and pasting configs in. Like
Oh,
it's these, and so I
oh, that
kind of look
sounds
at
so
this.
painful.
Yeah, and it was,
Yeah.
and they of course they have configuration like differences and some
Configuration
stuff doesn't.
drift, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Bet they get a lot of that.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, very inconsistent. It, Everything becomes inconsistent at that point, or at least a risk of being inconsistent. So
Right.
it's a big problem. So what I'm trying to do is help people by sharing the insights that I've picked up along the way, because there isn't anybody else doing this. There's a lot of information out there, like DataStax Academy. I helped build DataStax Academy. There's a
Yeah,
ton of good
yeah.
information. It will get you to a reasonable point where you can like run Cassandra, where you understand kind of the fundamentals of it. Um, but like there's a certain scale, there's a certain type of problem that only like exists at massive scale. And that's
Right.
why I've,
Right.
I've shared things like my time series at massive scale blog post and my videos about that, and, town halls and things like that. So it's really trying to help people um, become that good, where they're aware of the best practices, how to do things at this huge scale, where they can
Hmm.
build the right tools, and they can become um, they can become amazing operators,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Help them
and then
level
they
up.
can.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, I think I'll keep like consulting is a thing that I enjoy doing. I enjoy helping people, but in the ideal world for me, like I would love to be able to just kind of build these training programs, and like some of them would be longer. Like the first one that I'm doing is called Operator Excellence, and
Hmm.
I've got a whole bunch of information at RustyRazorblade.com/training.
Sure.
Um, and it's an 8-week program, meeting once a week for 90 minutes. And the cool thing about it is that it's not just me talking about how things are going to work. It's I'm actually bringing up like lab environments, like sandbox lab environments that we're going to be breaking, we're going to be fixing. They're going to be just, people are going to get really hands on in the way that helped me become like get to the point that I'm at now. Um,
Sure.
and I think that by passing on that information, I think it's a good thing for the community. It's a good thing for for me just personally. It's very rewarding. So I'm really hoping it catches on, and I definitely want to. Yeah, I just want to do more of these.
Oh, nice. So that's on your website then, rustyrazorblade.com.
Yeah. So when you go there, you would see like you'll see the blog is the first thing you see, but
Yep.
you can get there. There's training in the top corner, and registration. I had just opened up registration this week, so
Okay.
so now you can go in. People can sign up.
Nice.
Yeah, so a bunch of people have signed up already. The class is actually already half full, so we're like I'm pretty pumped about it. I've gotten really great feedback, and I'm actually going to be joined by Jordan West.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Also,
yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
he also worked at Apple, also
Yep.
worked at
Yep.
Netflix. Like, we actually fixed several issues while I was at Netflix together.
Hmm.
So we had to pair up and fix some like uh, really weird issues. Um, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think, to me, I think the opportunity to kind of learn from two committers who've both been at Apple and Netflix and have literally done this at like the biggest scale in the world.
Right.
Um,
Right.
to me, it's like there's no better way to take your Cassandra like kind of career and grow. Um, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
so that's the that's my pitch. I'm really I'm really trying to provide a lot of value for people.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome, John.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I think we're at time. I just want to
Mhm.
say, John, this has been really great. It's always a pleasure when our paths cross.
I
Um,
agree.
so, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great to have you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Okay,
All
everyone,
right.
have a good one. We'll see you. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening to the Apache Cassandra Corner. Apache Cassandra is a registered trademark of the Apache Software Foundation. Thank you, and have a great day.